In this video, I'm going to be going over the camera body. And one important thing to know is that when you buy most high quality cameras, the body is usually sold separately from the lenses. They aren't generally attached unless it's a cheaper quality camera body. So in this video, I'm gonna be going over the 5 main things to look out for when trying to find what type of camera body you want to get to shoot with. Let's go ahead and start with the first thing to look for, and that is going to be the sensor size. The sensor is essentially, if you were to take a camera and take the lens off, you're gonna see a little box in there. And that is what takes the information from the lens and puts it into the digital format of the camera. So the bigger the sensor is, generally the more high quality your photo is going to be. You're gonna be able to shoot in more low light situations. You're going to be able to have a higher resolution, and so on and so forth. They're also more expensive. That's another thing to keep in mind. So there's gonna be 3 main types of sensor sizes that you're most likely going to encounter in your life. Now, there's a ton of different sensor sizes to go over, but I'm gonna go over the 3 most important ones. And we'll start with the most basic. And the most basic is gonna be 1-inch variation sensor sizes. And these are gonna be sensors that you're gonna find in phones. So for example, an iPhone, Galaxy, Pixel, this is where you're gonna find those small sensor sizes. And they're not gonna be able to produce a very high quality image, but they're good enough for sharing on social media, posting with your friends, and maybe printing out fairly small renditions of your photos. The next sensor size is going to be something called a APS-C crop sensor size. And this is generally where you're gonna start to get into amateur photographers, beginner, or even my backup camera is an APS-C crop sensor camera. They're not as high quality, but they do get the job done, and this gets to the point where you can start to change out lenses and start to get more into the better photo territory. Keep in mind that if you do get an APS-C crop sensor camera body, you also have to buy APS-C crop sensor lenses to go along with it. So if you're just starting to get into photography and you want to take it a little more seriously than your phone, look for this type of camera body. Once you've spent a few months or years, for example, shooting with a crop sensor camera body, you're going to want to move into a full frame camera body. And this is where you get the big boy sensors and get really high resolution photos. So for example, the video right now that you're looking at right now, this is being shot on a A7R III, which is a 42 megapixel camera. So the higher the megapixels you see on a sensor, generally the higher the resolution and the better quality of the photo. So one thing to keep in mind about resolution. So you're gonna see, for example, most phones are around 12 megapixels, most APS-C crop sensors are around 20 to 24 megapixels, and full frames can be 24 up to 60 or even higher. Some of these new cameras are getting pretty crazy with the megapixels. So for example, let me break this down. So if you see a 24 megapixel camera, that means that the resolution is 6,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels, and so on and so forth. Also, the bigger the resolution of the camera is, aka the higher the megapixels, the more you're gonna be able to crop and maintain quality. So if you're a person who likes to shoot like really big scenes and then crop a really small corner out of it and still maintain quality, you're gonna wanna get a camera with a high resolution. And this also transfers over to printing your photos. If you wanna print really big photos, for example, like 24 by 36 inch photos, you're going to have to get a full frame camera, or perhaps you might be able to stretch it with a APS-C crop sensor camera, a size that big, but in general, you're only gonna be limited to a few smaller print sizes with an APS-C crop sensor. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're looking for a camera body. So sensor size, most important thing to look out for. So the next couple terms that you're gonna see tossed around with camera bodies are mirrorless versus DSLR cameras. And I'm just gonna cut this really fast for you and tell you, you should be getting a mirrorless camera in today's day and age. They're significantly easier to work with than a DSLR. So a mirrorless camera essentially has an electronic viewfinder on the back of the camera. So before you take the photo, you can see what it's gonna look like based off the exposure. A DSLR camera is generally bigger, bulkier, and you can't see what you're going to be taking a photo of exactly. You can look through the viewfinder and see, but you're not going to see how well that photo is exposed until you go ahead and take a test shot. So this can add a significant amount of time to your workflow. And honestly, I don't see why anyone should be shooting it with a DSLR nowadays. Mirrorless is the way to go. They're way smaller. They're a little bit more expensive, but trust me, the time you save in using a mirrorless camera will be well worth the couple extra dollars you're gonna pay to get one. So look for a mirrorless camera when searching for a camera body. The next question that's gonna come up is, what brand should you get when it comes to your camera body? And honestly, you're gonna wanna get a brand that's gonna work with the lenses that you're gonna go with. But like I said in my gear video, there's not too much differentiation if you're getting a mainstream brand like Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fuji, so on and so forth. If you've heard of it before, it's most likely high quality, so it doesn't really matter. Just pick a name that sounds cool to you and stick with it. Third question that comes up is, what is your budget? So like I said earlier, if you're going to be going for a full frame camera, it's going to be significantly more expensive, generally in the couple $1,000 range, versus say a APS-C crop sensor camera, which is going to be around $1,000, versus a phone, which can be $600 to $1,000. So based off your budget, that's where you're going to want to look. And like I said, I would start off with an APS-C crop sensor to make sure you're into photography before you start getting into the full frame camera world. So for the final question is, what features should I get? So in this portion of the video, I'm gonna go over a few popular features to look out for when looking for your camera body. One feature that I like to keep in mind is, can it shoot video? So if you're gonna be shooting videos like this, or if you're gonna be vlogging, a lot of mirrorless cameras nowadays can shoot video, so that is something to look out for. What type of video? Can it shoot 4K? Can it shoot in slow motion, aka something like 120 frames per second is something you're gonna wanna look for. So is video something you're interested in, or are you purely photography? So that's one thing to look out for. Another thing to look out for in your camera body is, can it shoot time lapses? Does it have a time lapse mode? A lot of times you can buy a external, it's called an intervalometer, if you want to be able to shoot time lapses, but it's way easier to just have a feature that's built into your camera that can shoot time lapses for you. So if that's something you're gonna look out for, look for a time-lapse mode in your photography camera, and it will make your life way easier. It's also great for self-portraits. So if you're gonna be doing those shots where you're standing off dramatically in the distance, having a time-lapse mode where it can just take one shot every 2 seconds for 100 photos can be great. If you're gonna be running off and standing in the distance, you wanna do a couple different poses, then come back and pick the photo that looks the best. So for me, time-lapse mode is something that's really important. Another thing to look out for in cameras is, what is the focus tracking like? And this isn't too applicable to me or adventure photography in general. Focus tracking is essentially, can you lock focus on something that's moving and follow it and maintain focus with it? And this is really great for birds or animals that are moving fast, or even cars. But other than that, for 99% of landscapes, they're just sitting there waiting for you to take a photo. So focus tracking isn't that important. But you know, if you really want to get into birds and wildlife, it could be something you want to look out for. Another feature that goes along with focus tracking is the burst mode. So this is how many shots can the camera take in a second. So essentially you're going to want to look for frames per second, like how fast can it take. So for example, if you're tracking a bird, you want to be able to go brrr and take a bunch of shots while it's flying so you don't miss those microseconds. So this could be a feature you want to look out for. How many photos can it take in 5 seconds, and will it need to buffer and load those photos before it continues to take more photos after that? So look for frame per second or burst mode buzzwords when you're looking for a camera body. Another thing to look out for is weather sealing. So can the camera withstand weather? So if you go out in the rain or the blowing sand, can your camera body withstand that? And for me, this is extremely important because adventure photography, like I said earlier, you're going to want to be in a lot of crazy situations and bad weather conditions. So look for camera bodies that are weather sealed, and you'll end up saving yourself a lot of money and peace of mind when you're out in the field shooting. A couple other things to look out for are memory cards. So some of the upper tier cameras can hold 2 memory cards, which can be good if one of your memory cards fails, or if you want one memory card that's just for video and one that's just for photos. That could be an option. Another thing to look out for is the feel of the camera. So how does it feel in your hand? Do you like if there's the right amount of shortcuts? Do you like if the screen is where it is? One thing I would recommend highly is looking for a screen that could at least flip out down like this or tilt at certain angles. So that way it's not hard on your knees and you're constantly bending over if you're getting low. You can just flip it up and then just look down at it instead of having to get down on your knees and look. So this could save you a lot of hassle. And also if you're taking video, it could be useful to have a screen that flips out so you can see yourself recording if you need to. So just a few more features on the camera to look out for. Other than that, I think that's all the main things you're gonna wanna look for in a camera body. Obviously, you can get way more detailed with a ton of different nuances and specs if you want to get into it. But in terms of basic adventure photography, those are the buzzwords you're going to want to look out for, and the features and what they are and how they could apply to your photography process. Let's go ahead and jump into the next video.